Survivor has turned out an average of 2 seasons a year for over 2 decades, which adds up to hundreds of players to date. Sadly, not all of these Survivor castaways are still around today, including past winners and fan favorites. A competition show like Survivor can't go on for years and years without introducing twists along the way to keep things fresh. For Season 22, Redemption Island, that meant a new wrinkle where players voted out during the Tribal Council went to the titular island, where they could win their way back into the competition. Contestant Ralph Kiser finished in 9th place that season, while becoming a frequent source of comic relief for viewers, as he frequently misspelled his fellow castaways' names when voting at Tribal Council. After Survivor, Kiser went home to Virginia, where he returned to the farm he owned and operated. 11 years later, in 2022, Kiser died from a heart attack at the age of 56. Following his death, Jeff Probst tweeted about Kiser, writing, "His huge smile, his positive attitude, and of course his infectious rooster crow made him one of the most likable to ever play Survivor." In Survivor Season 27, Blood vs. Water, 10 contestants from previous seasons were brought back to compete against a tribe of their loved ones. Caleb Bankston, the fiancé of Colton Cumbie from Survivor One World, was part of the loved ones tribe.
I'm worried about Colton's reputation because he pissed a lot of people off. But I know a different Colton. This is going to be kind of a redemption for him.
He survived until the inevitable merging of the tribes and finished in 9th place. Bankston, a train conductor, died in a 2014 train derailment, only a year after Blood vs. Water aired. Jeff Probst expressed his sorrow in a statement, saying, "He was one of the most humble, likable contestants we've ever had the pleasure of working with on the show. A true gentleman. He will be missed by so many. We extend our most sincere condolences to his family and to his fiancée, Colton." The first season of Survivor, retroactively referred to as Survivor Borneo, seems quaint now compared to subsequent seasons. The basic premise of the show was still novel enough to be exciting, and the initial group of castaways were noteworthy by nature of being the first. Still, certain members of that season stood out at the time and remain among the most talked about in the history of the show. One such castaway is Rudy Boesch, who would later return for Survivor All-Stars in the 8th season.
The homosexual, he's one of the nicest guys I ever met, and he's good at what he does, you know, he's got leadership ability. And
at 72 years old during Borneo and 75 during All-Stars, Boesch remains the oldest castaway in the history of the show. In 2019, the retired Navy SEAL died of complications from Alzheimer's disease. He was 91. Following his death, fellow first-season castaway and winner Richard Hatch referred to Boesch as a dear friend and pointed out how their unlikely friendship was a great example of overcoming prejudices. Hatch tweeted, "While your time here is past, you will remain loved and iconic." Not all Survivor castaways are new to television. Take, for example, Cliff Robinson of Survivor Cagayan. Prior to competing, Robinson was an 18-year veteran of the NBA. The 1989 draft pick was awarded the 6th Man of the Year award in 1993 and was voted onto the All-Star team in 1994. His basketball pedigree made him an ideal candidate for Survivor, despite being 46 at the time. Although he proved himself a capable competitor against a field of almost all younger contestants, only Trish Haggerty was older at 48. Robinson's health took a bad turn after his time on the show. In 2017, he suffered a brain hemorrhage, and he had a non-cancerous tumor removed from his jaw the following year. In 2019, he was diagnosed with lymphoma, which ultimately caused his death. In 2020, at 53 years old, the NBA and Survivor veteran, known to his fans as Uncle Cliffy, died from the disease. Another Survivor contestant who was famous before her time on the show, Ashley Massaro, had been a WWE wrestler for 2 years when she appeared on 2007's Survivor China, the 15th season of the series.
I don't want to go home a loser, you know what I mean? Because I know my fans are going to want me to win.
However, her time on the show was as contentious as it was brief. She instantly butted heads with her fellow contestants and was voted off in the second Tribal Council of the season. A year after her short time on Survivor, Massaro was released from her contract with the WWE. At the time, Massaro said she'd asked to have her contract terminated early due to her daughter's illness, but there was apparently more to it than that. She later detailed what she said were poor working conditions and joined a 2016 class action lawsuit against the WWE for failing to look after the health and safety of its wrestlers, a legal conflict that came to be known as the WWE concussion lawsuit. 3 years later, Massaro died by apparent suicide. She was found unconscious at her home after failing to show up for a radio station gig. Efforts to resuscitate her were unsuccessful, and she died while being transferred to the hospital. Season 10, Survivor Palau, had a World War II theme and even used actual relics from the war on the set. The season also introduced audiences to Jennifer Lyon, who quickly became a fan favorite for her upbeat, positive attitude.
She stuck around in the competition for quite some time, before being eliminated in 4th place after losing a fire-making challenge due to a deadlocked tribal council vote.
After Survivor, Lyon took a crack at acting, appearing in the films Daddy Day Camp and Cannibal Feast. But in 2005, Lyon was diagnosed with breast cancer. She attended the Palau reunion that year, at which time she reconnected with Jeff Probst and some of her fellow contestants. Probst in particular spoke of how he and Lyon had a lot of emotional discussions about the impact of her disease on herself and her family. Lyon died in January 2010 at the age of 37.
Unfortunately, Jennifer Lyon isn't the only contestant from Survivor Palau to have passed away since her time on the show.
Her fellow castaway, Angie Jakusz, is the second member of that season to lose her life to cancer. Jakusz initially had trouble fitting in with her tribe due to her quirkiness, but soon won them over with her skill and challenges.
I felt horrible being picked last. I didn't think that I was going to be picked last.
Speaking to People magazine, her fellow castaway Kobe Archa praised Jakusz, saying, "People have to remember back in 2005, women weren't cast on Survivor with dreads and tattoos. She broke the casting barrier. Fans related to her story so much, and a lot of people wanted to see her play again for her strength." In January 2021, it was revealed that Jakusz had died from a rare form of colorectal cancer. She was just 40 years old. It's no secret that the producers of Survivor enjoy casting young, physically attractive contestants, but they've also done an admirable job of bringing in much older castaways than one might expect.
This approach was established right off the bat, as Borneo had 72-year-old Rudy Boesch, 63-year-old Sonja Christopher, and 64-year-old Bill "BB" Andersen.
That being said, while Boesch shocked everyone by making it all the way to 3rd place, his fellow 60-plus contestants were the first 2 voted out.
As long as you and I always know where the water is and we got control of the water map, no one else will be able to vote you or I out.
Andersen was the second castaway voted off on the season.
But even though his time on the show was brief, he still managed to parlay his 15 minutes of fame into endorsement deals with both Reebok and Home Depot.
In 2013, 13 years after securing his place in pop culture history, Andersen died from brain cancer at age 77.
In Season 29, Survivor San Juan del Sur, Southern charmer Keith Nale, along with his son Wes, were among the 9 pairs of loved ones competing against one another for the $1 million grand prize. Although he was the season's underdog and struggled with strategy, Nale's physicality and charm took him all the way to the Final 4.
People ask me if Survivor's fun, I tell them hell no. Survivor ain't fun, going on a cruise is fun, going fishing's fun.
In fact, he made such a lasting impact that he was invited to return by public vote for Season 31, Survivor Cambodia. Once again, Nale advanced far into the competition using his physical strengths before being voted off in 5th place.
In April 2023, Nale's son Wes shared with Entertainment Tonight.
He passed away this afternoon. He'd been battling cancer for the past few months, and we found out about it in January. The series issued a collective statement on Instagram, reading, "Keith was a one-of-a-kind human, completely unique in every way. He brought endless joy and laughter to Survivor fans and to those of us who made the show with him. He was adored by so many and will be greatly missed." Dan Lembo was 63 years old when he competed on Season 21, Survivor Nicaragua. Despite his age, he carried himself well, getting all the way to the top 5 before being voted off.
So I woke up this morning and looked in my bag, and my alligator shoes were missing.
He was a frequent target, but Lembo was often spared due to his strategic gameplay and the fact that he wasn't perceived as a threat. In September 2022, Lembo died from progressive supranuclear palsy at age 75. Around a decade ago, the internet helped fuel a war between the generations, pitting baby boomers against Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Zers. Survivor pounced on this in 2016 when they went with the gimmick of Millennials versus Gen X for the show's 33rd season. One of the early standouts of the Gen X team was Sunday Burquest, whose easygoing, likable demeanor allowed her to form multiple alliances, keeping her safe all the way to her elimination in 7th place. In 2021, only 5 years after her Survivor stint, author and youth pastor Burquest died at age 50 from esophageal cancer that spread to her ovaries. She'd beaten breast cancer in 2012 before her appearance on Survivor. In a heartfelt Instagram tribute, Jeff Probst spoke warmly of Burquest's smile and her kindness, writing, "She seemed to understand better than most that life is for living, so say yes to life whenever possible." Texas-born Louisiana resident Clay Jordan was the runner-up in Season 5 Survivor Thailand, despite being the last man picked during the tribal schoolyard pick. Jordan and Brian Heidick formed an alliance that took them all the way to the top 2. However, Heidick proved to be more strategic and took home the win. Throughout his 39 days on the island of Koh Tao, Jordan made some enemies with his controversial remarks. He also is well known for an infamous moment between him and opposing tribe member Rob Zabachnik, who grabbed Jordan around the throat during a challenge. Despite being divisive, he was undeniably one of the most entertaining castaways. In May 2022, a few months after his wife's death, Jordan passed away following a short illness at the age of 66. The oldest contestant in Season 6 Survivor the Amazon, 56-year-old castaway Roger Sexton performed well physically but was ultimately voted off after making some enemies along the way. Caught up in the gender dynamics of the competition, Sexton let his misogynistic mindset get the better of him. When the original alliances based on gender lines shifted without his knowledge, Sexton was blindsided and became the 7th castaway to be voted off in one of the most memorable episodes in Survivor history. In October 2022, Sexton died at age 76 from Lewy body dementia. Russian actor, singer, and model Zhanna Friske was a 2-time contestant on the Russian version of Survivor. In her first season on the show, Friske was among 20 castaways of Russian celebrities. She made it to the final day, but lost to Yana Volkova. After returning from the island, Friske announced she was splitting from the musical girl group Blestasia to embark on a solo career. The next year, she returned to the show as one of the 9 returning castaways. Again, Friske ended the season as the runner-up, losing to Alexander Matveyev. Friske continued to thrive in the spotlight after her time on the show, becoming a well-known celebrity in Russia. However, in January 2014, just months after their son's birth, Friske's husband announced that she had brain cancer. According to Billboard, Friske refused chemotherapy while pregnant with her son for his safety. In June 2015, Friske died at age 40. Former Australian Football League pro footballer Rob Dickson won the first season of Australian Survivor. Dickson impressed viewers with his physical and strategic abilities throughout the 39-day competition and secured his spot in the top 2 by winning the final immunity challenge. At the final tribal council, he defeated Shonya Brown in a 5-2 vote. In April 2009, Dickson and his 2 sons died in a car accident during a trip to South Africa. Dickson's wife Dusty survived the crash. Dickson was inducted into the Australian Survivor Hall of Fame in 2020. 24-year-old castaway Tebby Gasennelwe won Survivor Africa Panama, the first season of a pan-regional Survivor Africa that aired in the southern part of the continent.
I have to play the that I'm willing to do it.
Gasennelwe, who is from Gaborone, Botswana, triumphed against 11 other castaways over the course of 21 physically and mentally grueling days. When it came down to the final 4, the remaining castaways competed in 2 challenges to determine the final 2. Gasennelwe advanced after winning the first challenge and ultimately won in a 5-1 vote against runner-up Jeremiah Zulu, taking home the $100,000 grand prize and becoming one of the youngest Survivor winners to date. Sadly, her life came to a premature and shocking end.
In August 2016, Gasennelwe was murdered by her gardener at age 34. A memorial Facebook page created by Gasennelwe's loved ones shared her obituary, describing the writer and entrepreneur as a selfless soul who deeply enriched their lives. The page remains active, and loved ones continue to share cherished memories of Gasennelwe. A former Philippine Basketball Association pro basketball player who went by the nickname the Lucky Charm was one of 16 castaways in Season 2 of the Philippine version of Survivor, Survivor Philippines Palau. Bolado retired from professional basketball in 2003 due to an injury, but he was still in great shape when he arrived on the island of Peleliu to compete on the show. At 6 feet 7 inches tall, he possessed a clear physical advantage over the other castaways. On day 21, Bolado was voted off in a 2-1-1 vote. He was the last castaway to be eliminated before the merge. Although Bolado was given the chance to rejoin the competition in the final face-off challenge a few days later, he ultimately lost to the season's runner-up, Justine Ferrer. In September 2017, Bolado died in a motorcycle accident in Cambodia, where he owned a restaurant. Bolado, who won 11 basketball titles between 1994 and 2003, was just 47 at the time of his death. In Season 15 of the French version of Survivor, Koh Lanta Malaise, 60-year-old retired nature guide and self-proclaimed adventurer Bernard Deniaud made it to the top 5. Initially banished at the start of the season after not being selected during the tribal schoolyard pick, Deniaud managed to find his footing after being integrated into the Mawar tribe. He eventually made it to the merge and was the last Mawar tribe member standing. However, Deniaud was ultimately eliminated after losing the orienteering challenge alongside Philippe Bizet. In May 2021, Deniaud died from an unpublicized illness at the age of 69. The show's host, Denis Brognard, took to X to commemorate the departed castaway, writing, "He was a man who loved nature, a great sportsman who loved long-term challenges. Despite keeping his distance from the show after the season's conclusion, his competitiveness and genuine spirit lives on within the show's legacy in France and around the Survivor world." In Season 6 of the French version of Survivor, Koh Lanta Vanuatu, 60-year-old heating and sanitary warehouseman Jean-Claude Errin made it to day 18 before being medically evacuated from the game after an injury to his hand during the 5th reward challenge failed to heal. Errin was one of 3 castaways who had been medically evacuated that season, which was especially difficult due to a cyclone and several earthquakes. Given his age, Errin did relatively well throughout the challenges before his injury. He told Le Républicain Lorraine, "I wanted to show my children and my grandchildren that old people can still do something good." In October 2019, Errin died from a ruptured aneurysm at the age of 74. He'd been diagnosed with prostate cancer 2 years earlier. The host, Denis Brognard, took to X to commemorate the departed castaway, writing, "Thoughts for his loved ones and all the adventurers who were lucky enough to know him." Sweden's Expedition Robinson 1997 was the inaugural season of the Survivor franchise, and arguably the first reality TV competition of its kind. Bosnian refugee Sinisa Savija and 15 other castaways were stepping into metaphorical uncharted territory when they were put on Tengah Island in Malaysia. Although Savija coped with the challenges, he struggled to connect with the rest of the castaways, with Swedish being his second language. As a result, Savija was the first ever castaway to be voted off the franchise.
Adulation, mega prize money, insta fame. Peering in from the outside, reality TV can seem like a golden ticket.
In July 1997, just 4 weeks after he returned from the island, Savija died by suicide at age 34. The show premiered 2 months after his death, and his screen time was significantly cut down due to the circumstances. Savija's loved ones attributed his suicide directly to the show and its impact on his mental health. His wife told The Guardian, "He became deeply depressed and agonized. He felt degraded as a person and didn't see any meaning in life." His death continued to raise questions about the ethics of reality TV in the years that followed. Sonja Christopher was the very first contestant voted off the American version of Survivor, getting the boot during the show's premiere season, Survivor Borneo, in 2000. Competing at the age of 63, Christopher was a retired teacher and music therapist who had just survived a much graver challenge, invasive breast cancer,
as well as the end of a more than decade-long relationship. That's when she saw an article in her local paper about CBS holding auditions for a remote island reality show. Despite charming her fellow castmates, Christopher only lasted 3 days on the show, but the short time on the series still took its toll. She told EW in 2020, "I was pretty beaten up. To this day, I still have bruises that don't go away." A native of Washington and longtime resident of Walnut Creek, California, Christopher passed away from undisclosed causes on April 26, 2024, at age 87.
If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org.